After the U.S. accuses two Chinese nationals of hacking intellectual property, China's foreign ministry dismisses the charges as self-deceiving. How harmful is this latest chapter in Sino-U.S. tensions? And U.S. President Donald Trump has taken everyone by surprise in announcing the pullout of troops from Syria and Afghanistan. Is the Middle East about to get a whole load more dangerous as a result? Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. China has lodged stern representations with the U.S. after its Justice Department accused two Chinese nationals of hacking intellectual property and confidential business information. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson on Thursday dismissed the indictment of what they call a state-sponsored conspiracy as self-deceiving, saying the U.S.'s massive spying on others is no secret to the public, and Washington has severely violated basic norms governing international relations. She also said the incident is seriously harmful to cooperation between the two countries. The spat comes at a time when the Trump administration has taken a hard stance on China on trade, technology and espionage. The recent arrest of a Chinese tech giant's executive has intensified those tensions. So why is the U.S. so adamant with directing this espionage drama in which it plays a victim itself? And to what extent might it escalate the Beijing-Washington tensions? Joining me in the Beijing studio is Victor Gao, Vice President at the Center for China and Globalization, and in another Beijing studio, Aina Tangen, a current affairs commentator from Philadelphia, U.S., is Brandon Blackburn-Dwyer, the founder of Grasshopper Strategies. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Let me go to Victor first. On Thursday, as I said, U.S. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and FBI Director Christopher Wray announced the indictment against two Chinese nationals, Zhu Hua and Zhang Shilong, saying they were members of a hacking group operating in China within a community known as Advanced Persistent Threat 10, or APT-10, but China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson has refuted these as groundless. How much do we know about these cases, and how difficult is it for the U.S. to make such accusations? How much evidence do they have?
First of all, I read the information made public in the public domain, and I have several points to make. Even if we take whatever that has been alleged as 100% true, which is not, but let's just make that assumption, then whatever that has been accused of compares with whatever the United States has been accused of by, let's say, Edward Snowden and WikiLeaks, for example. It's basically peanuts compared with what the United States has been accused of in internet violations. And the United States has been accused of, for example, hacking into the personal mobile phone of the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, for example, and all other hilarious deeds, for example, committed by the U.S. authorities. Therefore, I think the U.S. accusation is, first of all, designed to become very sensational, and it's designed to politicize the situation, and it's also designed to add more fuel to the frictions and the animosities between China and the United States. And the timing could not be worse, because between China and the United States, the two countries are more or less at a crossroads in how they can handle their bilateral relations, whether eventually it will be a future of peace for getting along with each other, or eventually it's more and more confrontation. So I would say the United States really need to reflect as to what it has been doing in terms of cybersecurity violations before it has any justification to point an accusing finger at another country.
Brandon, what's your take from the United States? I mean, is it really that the U.S. is trying to make a big fuss out of something that is not so significant so as to put political pressure on China?
I think we can actually separate this. I know there's been a lot of activity recently that it seems to be aimed at adding pressure to China. The reality is this indictment is the third in a string of indictments about cyber attacks and hacking that the FBI has released in the last 18 months. The first two, one was aimed at Russia, actors within Russia. Another one was aimed at actors within Iran. This most recent one is aimed at actors within China, or allegedly so. So for me, I think that we're seeing the confluence of two separate things going on. We are seeing a long-standing investigation into hacking. This investigation into cloud hopping, the activity that is being charged as the activity by APT-10, they've been investigating that since 2006. So this is a culmination of 12 years worth of investigations. The timing of it, the unsealing of the indictment, that may be somewhat of a political move, but the reality is this has been on the FBI's radar and part of their priorities for more than a decade.
Aina, what's your take on the situation, and help us also understand a bit from the technical side. I understand these two nationals are in China, so what steps might the U.S. take after the indictment?
Well, there are no steps, and this is what's very interesting about this. I have a background in criminal law, and I was also worked in a district attorney's office. What you have here, if you read the indictment, it's something that looks more like it was written by the State Department rather than somebody who was looking to prosecute a case. The accusations are sensational, and I agree with Victor on this, but there is no proof offered. They're saying, oh, a lot of people have been hurt, a lot of countries have been invaded, but they haven't gotten very specific. I mean, when you're trying to prove a case, you have to say, look, this person was hurt in this way. They've contacted both IBM and HP, which are the only two that have been indicated as being on this list. And IBM says, no, it never happened. And the other one says, oh, we're not commenting, and we wouldn't comment on anything like this. And if anything like this happened, we would have taken precautions against it. So the real question is why are they bringing a case which they're never going to have to prove in court, because they're never going to see these people, making very wild accusations and not providing any kind of proof. Purely from a technical point of view, this is just pure sensationalism. And I would disagree with my colleague that this is something, it may have been on the radar, but the fact is they're not giving anything, and it doesn't seem that they're prepared to prove anything.
Are we seeing a similar case in the so-called spy poisoning case in the UK, where again no concrete evidence or solid evidence have been produced, and yet simply the fact that the government believes is highly credible that the Russians have carried out, then it's fine. And basically the purpose is really to make China looks more like a country which accommodates cyber insecurity, cyber theft and commercial espionage. Victor?
No, I think the two cases are very different. The poisoning case in England actually involved the use of a lethal poison, which is very, very rare, and only certain country actually has possession of that particular type of poison. And also there have been proven evidences that two special agents of that particular country's military intelligence actually found their way to that particular small town, and so you can basically connect the dots together to. But again,
you can still fully establish the legal facts that although Russia is suspected to have these poisonous gas, you cannot prove that the Russian government was actually behind it. And again, that is my point. When you cannot prove it, it seems not to be important anymore. Aina,
I'm going to agree with Victor on this one. There's no proof that anything happened at all. Supposedly the victims are denying that they were, if somebody says, oh, they were robbed, and you go to the people, were you robbed? No. This is the point. There's no indication or proof whatsoever that anything actually happened. They're throwing out this thing that 100,000 military people were, that their social security numbers and names were somehow downloaded. But where? For what purpose? I mean, if this technology was in fact stolen, why isn't this technology, why aren't they saying, look, here's where it was used, and we can prove it. You look at this engine, and it incorporates this, this particular technology. There's nothing. There are no details about that. It's just lots of accusations.
Yeah, Brandon.
we're conflating a number of different things here, and I'm going to disagree with my colleague here on a legal perspective. It's an indictment, not a trial. It's an indictment which is wild accusations. My wife is a defense attorney. She will tell you that indictments all the time include no evidence other than a cop saying, you did this, and I'm just going to say it because I'm going to say it. This is that point of the trial. They also only partially unseal the indictment. Further, the victims that he's mentioning, IBM has said that they did not have any evidence or information stolen. Saying that you didn't have something stolen is very different than saying no one has ever tried to steal it. It's the difference between saying there's been no murder here, but that person might still be guilty of attempted murder. Now, I'm not saying that these people have done this. What I am saying is that it is still standard procedure that during the indictment phase, we will not see underlying evidence. And particularly in a cybersecurity case, we are talking about investigations that have gone on for more than a decade that probably include all sorts of sensitive information into how the accusation was come about. You would see all of that information held until trial, and even at trial, if that were to ever happen, which will not happen here in any way, shape, or form, even at trial, much of that information would probably not be released to the press because it would be considered to be either proprietary or actually sensitive to national security. Further,
and that's the point, Brandon.
They're saying that they have been victimized.
That's the point, Brandon.
The U.S. Navy has said that they have lost 100,000 people's information.
Yes, and they've lost other information before. And the point is that there will be no trial. So to level these accusations without attempting to even prove them is, as you say, wild speculation.
And that also draws my memory
We're talking about
of
international law.
No, you're not. We're talking about U.S. law.
That also draws me to the reports about a unusually high percentage of Chinese nationals being indicted or accused in the United States of stealing U.S. technological secrets or information. And often these cases ended up with no results, but the people's reputation, their lives would have already been totally damaged by the time these cases, shorty cases, eventually fall off, and these people have no way to reclaim their rights, to have their lives, to have their reputations repaired. Victor, your understanding.
I think this is exactly a very troubling point in this whole saga. Why? Because let's say if we make an assumption that what the Department of Justice is accusing of is true, then how do you deal with that? The best way is for the United States to contact the Chinese government authorities and try to seek cooperation and really to get to the bottom of what they suspect that these two Chinese nationals, so-called, have been doing in terms of hacking into U.S. or other countries' accounts, for example. However, what the United States is doing is not only accusing these two individuals, but also to accuse the Chinese government as aiding and abetting or directly involving in whatever these two individuals have been accused of doing. And you see, this is not creating any incentive for cooperation between the Chinese government and the U.S. government. And it seems that this whole accusation is designed to sensationalize the situation and to paint the Chinese government or China as a country as the culprit in this whole thing. I think this will generate a lot of indignation in China among the Chinese people, because what if the Chinese side also put forward all the evidences about what the U.S. government has been doing in hacking into the Chinese internet accounts, for example,
well,
then it's escalation.
Yeah. Well, we have to leave it there. Many thanks to my guests, Victor Gao, Vice President at the Center for China and Globalization, Aina Tangen, a current affairs commentator, and Brandon Blackburn-Dwyer, the founder of Grasshopper Strategies. We'll take a short break, and you have been watching The Point. I'll be back right after this. Stay with me. U.S. President Donald Trump took everyone by surprise on Tuesday by ordering a full rapid withdrawal of troops from Syria, a move that throws the American strategy in the Middle East into turmoil. He followed this up 2 days later by ordering the U.S. military to withdraw about half the troops in Afghanistan. Pentagon and State Department officials have been left scrambling to cope with the confusion in policy, which culminated in the abrupt resignation of Defense Secretary Jim Mattis. The U.S. has about 2,000 troops in Syria and about 14,000 in Afghanistan. The Kurdish-led forces in Syria has condemned the White House decision, warning that it would allow an Islamic State revival and threaten the battle in eastern Syria with dangerous implications for international stability. In contrast, Russian President Vladimir Putin welcomed the announcement, saying the defeat of the IS removes the need for the U.S. military presence in Syria. So joining me to discuss this decision from Washington, D.C. is Richard Weitz, a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, and Tegru Keskin, director of the Center for Global Governance at Shanghai University. From Moscow, we are joined by Pavel Felgenhauer, a Russian political and defense analyst. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Let me go to Mr. Weitz here. Yet again, President Trump's claims are at odds with his administration's assessments. Already there has been a strong backlash from Democrats and Republicans alike, and the resignation of Jim Mattis has underscored how strong that feeling is. Is there any chance that this new policy might be reversed at the 11th hour?
I would point out before I answer is that I think General Mattis's reasons for resignation, the Syrian decision may have contributed to it, but there were some underlying differences in approach. Now, I would say that it's possible President Trump will reverse his decisions. As we know, he originally wanted all U.S. forces out back in April. He made that statement, as well as when he came into office, he wanted to remove all of the U.S. forces from Afghanistan. But he changed his mind after listening to counter-arguments. So it is possible, but we also have some clear examples, such as the decision to withdraw the U.S. from the Iran nuclear deal, the Paris climate agreement, some trade agreements, that when he feels very strongly about an issue, he is comfortable resisting international and domestic opposition when he thinks it's in the national interest. So I think that at this point, I would think he's actually not going to reverse his decision.
The resignation of Jim Mattis amply appears to sum up the frustration felt in Washington, D.C. But Mr. Weitz, does President Trump actually have any supporters of this new policy?
Well, there are some senators and some members of Congress who have supported the decision. There have been some strategists who have argued that it makes sense for the U.S. to try and shift more of the burden of some global defense commitments to local partners, or in this specific case, to reduce somewhat the U.S. presence in the Middle East and Central Asia, and to strengthen that in Europe and China. So there is both intellectual and political support, though, as you said, the most common, the prevailing opinion, at least in Washington, is the thinking this might be a mistake because of the risks involved.
Let me go to Mr. Keskin in Shanghai. From a Turkish perspective, it has just been reported by the Washington Post that Turkish President Erdogan has just announced a delay of planned offensive in Syria and welcomed President Trump's decision to pull out from that country. How should we understand this decision?
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. Actually, I am not in Shanghai now. Currently, I'm in Washington, D.C. But Turkish, troops, operation basically has been postponed. I think as a result of the current visit, Turkish intelligence service, director of the Turkish intelligence service visited the Washington D.C. and met with the senators and certain institution agencies last week. And after that, basically, Erdogan's talk with the President Trump probably changed the current circumstances and conditions in the region. And U.S. pullout from this Syria, I think it will be difficult to pull out from the Syria. We will see in the near future, basically. But this is directly related, from my perspective, as far as I understand, this is directly related with the current visit, director of the Turkish intelligence service visit to Washington, and Erdogan's talk with the President Trump.
Mm-hmm. Many have criticized this decision by President Trump, arguing that the IS has actually not been defeated. Now that the U.S. troops are expected to pull out, maybe the IS soldiers will regroup and get stronger again. How likely is that, Mr. Keskin?
I don't think this is the case. I don't think Islamic State or Al-Qaeda or other kind of organizations, they weren't even strong in the first place in Syria. Please, we should remember how the war in Syria started in 2011 and early 2012. Both United States and Turkey agreed to support the opposition movements in Syria. As a result of this, opposition movements have been trained and financed and supported by the United States and Turkey collaboratively on this subject. But I don't think Islamic movements, especially groups like ISIS or Al-Qaeda, as strong as now it used to be in Afghanistan, other places, Yemen maybe, but they are not strong today. But main objective is for Turkey actually eliminating the Kurdish corridor in the north part of the Syria. This is the main objective of Turkey for now.
Yeah.
But before, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Felgenhauer, what is your answer to that question? What's going to be the impact of this U.S. announcement, if carried out, on the future of the IS groups? The IS group, by the way.
Yeah. Well, yes, of course, the Kurds in Rojava and the Northern Federation of Syria, Kurdish squad, are the main losers. But ISIS is going to be also a victor in this situation. It's clear, because the Kurds have already said that, first of all, they'll move their forces from Dar al-Zor, where they were fighting ISIS, to the north to prepare to meet an inevitable Turkish onslaught. And second, they're prepared to release several thousand of ISIS prisoners they're holding, including international terrorists and fighters, because now they don't have any fight already anymore with ISIS. Their fight is going to be with Turkey. So ISIS is going to have more forces. ISIS is going to have less enemies. And that's going to be some of a revival there, and most likely ISIS-led terrorist activity in other parts of the world, as some of these fighters, international fighters, move back to different places like Central Asia, Europe, the bigger Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it's going to be. It's not going to be a very nice situation at all. But there is, of course, a good side to this decision, too. Because Syria was a place where Russia and American military were fighting parallel wars, and there was always a possibility of a direct Russian-American clash. Though, of course, there was this process of a deconflictization. Now, with Americans out, the possibility disappears, and that's good for international peace, that Syria will not become a point where American and Russian soldiers would be fighting each other, even theoretically.
Okay. Mr. Weitz, what's your reaction? What is America's reaction to that kind of possibility when President Trump announces that U.S. soldiers are going to withdraw from Syria? Isn't he aware of the fact that he's pretty much giving Russia a big gift?
Well, the president's main concern in Syria has been the Iranian presence. At times, U.S. officials have laid out a more expansive agenda, as well as fighting terrorism. At times, they've talked about trying to reduce Russian influence or removing Assad. But along with countering terrorism and countering Iran and preventing WMD use, the role of Russia is seen a little more mixed. I mean, if Russia could help reduce the Iranian presence, can carry on the fight against ISIS even without the U.S. forces, I think that's what the president is hoping will occur. It's a bit of a risk, but his general strategy is basically to reduce the U.S. presence in some areas to let other countries take up the burden. And in this context, he may see Russia as a potential partner in that effort.
But do you personally believe that is not going to leave some space for its rivals such as Russia and Iran to expand their influence on the ground in Syria?
Well, that influence is already quite extensive. I mean, basically what's happened is since the Russian military intervention in 2015, the whole war has been reversed. Assad is much more firmly in power, the Iranian presence has grown, and Russia has pretty much entrenched itself with both enduring bases and continuing air presence. Keeping the U.S. troops there wasn't going to change that. Withdrawing them may lead to a slight increase in those forces, but it's not going to really change the fundamental dynamics.
Okay.
I think the main challenge with risk, besides from, as you mentioned, we discussed the rise of terrorism, again, terror insurgents, is that it does reduce the U.S. leverage in the Syrian peace game. I mean, before both Russia, Iran, and the Assad government, they all had to take into account the U.S. military presence and find some way to get it removed. If the U.S. pulls out unilaterally, then our ability to influence any kind of future Syrian political developments is substantially weakened.
Understandably. I have about 20 seconds, sorry. Mr. Falkenhauer, let me ask you the impact on the peace process now that the United States is out of the military matrix. What does that mean for the peace-building process?
Well, it's going to be, the situation in Syria will become a bit less complicated. With America out, that means it's, of course, Iran, it's Russia, it's Turkey, it's Israel. But America minus, and together with America, most likely other French and British and Norwegian special forces that were working with Americans are going to go. This is going to make the situation, if not easier, at least less complicated. Will that bring peace? That's a totally different question.
Okay. Many thanks to my guests, Richard Weitz, a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, Toguru Keskin, director of the Center for Global Governance at Shanghai University, joining us from Washington, D.C., and Pavel Falkenhauer, a Russian political and defense analyst. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. You've got The Point. Don't go away. Tomorrow I'll be here at the same time. Do join me then.